Hello, this is Sheila Sophia, the podcast. My name is Mem Sahib. I'm on it. So now, one of the ongoing public conversations I find most amusing is the one on corruption. Kenyans love to talk about how, if it weren't for corruption, this nation would look so different. And they're right. The trajectory of the conversation doesn't change much. It starts off with how evil it is. Then it turns to how we need better leadership. Then it moves to how even us, the wananchi, are not particularly better. That the people in office are somehow a reflection of us. That is the part I dissent with, but I find most hilarious. Because I don't know about you, but I am not a mad woman. Let me explain. Whenever I have sat with elders and asked about colonialism, the subject of the Africans who collaborated with the colonizers always comes up, and with understandable reason. And the story of how those Africans got those posts has remained consistent, at least in my neck of the woods. You can fact check and confirm with your elders and expand the conversation thus. They have informed me over and over that the home guards chosen were the social deviants and misfits. The madman who terrorizes people in the market, make him a home guard. The village drunk whose children are destitute, home guard. The guy who has been caught in petty theft and has been ostracized by society, home guard. And it makes sense. It makes sense to me because the British and Americans who came to be settler colonialists were often themselves social misfits back home. It was the troublesome sons of wealthy families who were sent on adventurous travels by their bewildered fathers because they didn't know what to do with them, like Macmillan, or the prisoners who were resettled in places like Australia. Colonialism first exported Britain's and some of America's social misfits, so it makes sense that when they arrived wherever they did, they found people like themselves to be their allies. You see, people of vice will not have much patience for people of principle. Principle requires either fearful subservience or enough intelligence to understand the philosophy behind the doctrines that govern public behavior. A goon has neither the meekness needed to follow rules, nor the intellectual resources and patience needed to learn why the rules exist. These men, desperate to establish some kind of dominance and redeem their public image, were rewarded with land and authority for their service to the colonialists. The settlers understood that a person who doesn't feel the warmth of the village is more than ready to burn it down, because they had been sent to distant lands for trying to burn home themselves. The result of this was a change in the public psyche of many colonized peoples. In Europe, internally antisocial behavior and external conquest are part of their cultural fabric. Desturi zao zaruhusu kutovuka, na mara nyingi watovu wa nidhamu hawaadhibiwi. Economic sabotage, for example, is not considered wrong if you can, for one, cover it up sufficiently, usually by ensuring the parts that are brutal are happening in distant lands, such as in sweatshops and child labor camps and dangerous mines. Or two, if you sell the illusion that anybody in your society can have opportunity to become wealthy by becoming economic saboteurs themselves, therefore making it an aspirational position by offering shambolic platforms where the public can try their luck, such as in the stock market, and therefore feel that they are in a free and fair market with equal opportunity. European culture has always rewarded brutality, conquest, and theft, seeing these things as intelligent strategy for wealth acquisition. Do not forget, these are people who built entire stadiums to watch helpless people be mauled by wild animals. In global politics, they are the children who go home with stuff their parents do not buy, and no one bats an eyelid or asks them how they got it. They are only told, "Thank you for bringing shiny new things." And in some cases, they will even set up museums to showcase these stolen items, happy that their sons were such efficient and shameless thugs. They have developed all kinds of social rules to accommodate and normalize the problems a capitalist patriarchy causes. I mean, think about it. What kind of culture would breed a people who, everywhere they went, they felt the need to rename things for their queen and king? How is that not, "Look, mommy, I'm such a good thief"? This is familiar territory to them. But this was the first time for many colonial nations that evil would win without recourse. If you're Kenyan and of a certain generation, then you have heard of the stories about ogres. In many of those stories, the public resolution on appropriate punishment for the ogre's crimes against the community was that each eligible person in said community took responsibility in the collective punishment. In the story of Takayo, every member of the village brought their own stone to stone him with. It did not matter if the ogre was internal or external. What was expected was that the evil would lose because the collective was in agreement about what was evil, about the punishment, and about the withdrawal of any social privileges that an upstanding member of the community previously enjoyed. Aliyejua kuishi na watu, kuishi na wenzake, aliishi na watu. Aliyekiuka, naye aliadhibiwa na kuepukwa ipasavyo. But now, we're in colonial Kenya. The madmen and village drunks are now the paramount chiefs, home guards, and whatever other little colonial administrative roles Africans were needed to fill. They have been told that the more taxes they collect, the more rewards they get. And all kinds of taxes have been introduced, including breast tax. They have been told to use force to collect the taxes, because if they don't, Africans, of course, will not pay. And like we said, they have a point to prove. The village drunk and village madman have authority, a gun, and motivation. At the same time, a law has been passed, mainly to protect British interests, that states that the person with the first title deed to the land is considered the original owner of the land. They are, on paper, 0.0 millions of acres of community land that are now officially traceable to one Mzungu or the other, as opposed to the communities who are having to fight battles at home. And the only Africans who happen to have title deeds are who? The village drunks, the madmen, the ones who are now brutalizing the people. The hands of the war that has been brought home are now the most rewarded and decorated hands. Let me give you an example. Recently in Kenya, a 40-year-long case was concluded where land was re-awarded to a family that claims to have had the original title. How did they get the original title? You ask excellent questions, darling. Their ancestor, the one whose name is on the original deed, right, was a slave trader. When the British abolished slavery, he had dead stock. So he went to them asking for a solution. His customers had essentially closed down his business. The British told him the slaves could be resettled on an island in the south of Kenya and allocated them some land. He, of course, took the liberty to register all the land in his own name. So, what was his PR campaign? He built a house of worship and a school, rebranding from slave trader to Mwalimu. The descendants of the slaves, of course, restarted their lives and built their homes, seeing as there was nothing else for them to do and nowhere else for them to go. Fast forward to a century and some change later, they would be told that the land under their feet belongs to the slave trader's family as far as the law is concerned, because one of his descendants filed to have them kicked out and any title deeds they were awarded revoked on grounds that they had had the original title and they didn't sell. Let me just give an anecdote on turning home into a battleground. People are forced to make space for a daily life that is embattling to them. And this has persisted in the Kenyan psyche to date. I often see commentary online where people talk about the failings of leadership preemptively. Tutauzwa sote is said in resignation. There is expectation that home will once again not be a safe haven for you. Strangers will come to fight you from outside and employ your own goons, your own madmen, your own village drunks, the ones you had said you cannot live with, to come and beat you up and sell the land under your feet. And there is nothing you can do about it because, well, the war is at home. There is nowhere for you to go. The war is where you live and where your people have always lived. It also persists in parenting methods. For example, millennials will remember beatings for going outside unsupervised because their parents were raising them in Moise, Kenya, and children were disappearing from neighborhoods at alarming rates and turning up mutilated or dead, or more likely mutilated and dead. It was too gory to explain to children, so the solution was to just beat them and tell them it is bad manners to be outside playing with your friends. And it was familiar to these parents because some of them had been raised during the emergency, when children and young men would be rounded up. You kind of get it, don't you? You get how these things are done to make certain things generationally normal. It has been warfare on all ends for a long time, and there wasn't enough time for introspection in the public consciousness to ask if it was worthwhile supplying the environment with new humans. Today, young men and especially young women are able to ask important questions about having children, because why do you want me to give birth to your soldiers? Put your own son in the front line, goddamn. Their God has his faults, but when he couldn't get over the anger he felt at sin and his thirst for blood as his chosen recompense for said sin, he sacrificed his own son. He did not ask the people to sacrifice theirs. While here, my beef with African gods is that they had not been wronged. The people who did right by them were punished with colonialism and slavery for their children for no reason. My great-grandfather's generation had not done anything wrong to Guy, so why didn't Guy protect them? Don't tell me to take the river back to its original course if the original course didn't offer any protections from the corruption you think going off course has cost. They were on course. That God didn't care. When you question gods, don't just question the white ones. All of them. should be able to handle scrutiny and intellectual rigor. But we'll address some of these things when I'm in the moods to discuss cultural informants of corruption. Today, I'm trying to keep it within the confines of governance and influence. Moi continues this breakdown of public consciousness with his issuing of political appointments to positions that were previously merit-based. It frustrated people who had worked hard, following the rules of society and trajectory, and it brought into Kenya's survival toolkit the concept of connections. What connections really meant was that one had to be silent in the face of grave injustices by the powerful against the people, and often willing to be the foot soldiers who met it out. Further entrenching this reasoning that brutality earns you wealth, position, and moral immunity. It was therefore no wonder to me that the child of a grifter who had been made president could so quickly be rebranded as a son who tried to help you, that you must now save, despite currently being professors of the faith, where God sacrifices his son for the people's sin, and not the other way around, of the people sacrificing their conscience first, and eventually their own sons for the sake of an authority's son. The most populous community had had practice in this moral collapse, so when it was time for the rest of the nation to practice, putting into top offices people who had committed crimes so grave and unconscionable they were considered to be against all of humanity, it wasn't as hard a pill to swallow. There was resistance. Half the nation did not vote for him. But there was clearly that other half that saw nothing wrong with it. And if they did, they could argue it away somehow, explaining that, they had property to protect and other such like things. And it became such excellently executed practice that in today's political climate, one of the candidates being seriously considered by Kenyans as a worthy contender for the presidency, many of whom are deluding themselves with narratives about him being the one with the kind of authoritativeness needed to set this country aright, had two innocent boys senselessly shot and unfairly punished an entire class of high schoolers in national examinations based on his own failures of sound philosophy. He was violent and has chosen over and over again to be violent to the youth. And violence in so many African societies is able to earn one political mileage because there's precedence. Remember too, the active war zone is at home. And often the soldiers, the people who fight for liberation, are young men or young people. And these Africans don't have places to go. In Europe, this problem of goons becoming wealthy is somewhat taken care of socially because they have a class system with strictly dictated codes of conduct. Like I said, they have established cultural methods to absorb their capitalistic patriarchal messes. There's a level of money that cannot behave a certain way without public outrage and scrutiny. To keep safe, or even a level of political influence, to keep safe, the nouveau riche have to toe certain lines. While here, if a person has jumped classes within one lifetime, to the point where existing upper classes, capital, and captains of industry have to make a lot of room for them within their circles, you can be certain that their sources of income are dubious. I'll explain this further when I feel like discussing class, but right now, just know that while not all wealth is ill-gotten, and it is dangerous to make blanket statements about how all wealth is illegal because it collapses the distinctions between moral success and immorality in the face of survival, the kind of wealth that forces generational money to accommodate you within their societies as a first gen is blood money. In my part of Africa, there have been people who have been wealthy long enough, in my part of Africa, they don't exist people, there haven't been people who have been wealthy long enough to truly dictate what upper class means and what its conduct should be. There's simply people with money and people who don't. And amongst those with money, none of them have had it long enough to develop tastes, codes of conduct, and public deportments associated with generations of more than ample resources within a family. What they do is that they act white, but even then, it's a watered down, caricaturized, and confused white. Because remember, the whites who came here were social misfits at home. So even they didn't know what they were doing. Anyway, the point is, Kenya looks like it might just make the same mistake it has made in the last 2 elections with Matiang'i. He has shown himself to be a man governed by a brutal inner constitution in every single office he has held. But because we have a history of associating brutality with leadership, and able leadership at that, see you the next time I feel like saying something.